They blocked my dock. No notice, no heads dash up. Just a blinding green sign screaming nitrogen monoxide docking, bolted right onto my Marina post, with a cheap plastic chain slung across like they were roping off a crime scene. At first, I figured it had to be a mistake until I saw who was behind it. That's when I realized this wasn't about some regulation, it was about control. And they picked the wrong guy to push around. What happened next? Let's just say it involved my own kind of sign and the sound of silence finally breaking. Ever had to deal with a control-obsessed HOA? Tell me in the comments. After 5 days on the water aboard the Wanderer, my 34-foot sailboat, I was more than ready to get back. The ocean air had cleared my mind. The rhythmic motion had shaken loose all the tension that comes from teaching high school engineering. Honestly, I just wanted to dock at my marina and crack open a cold beer. I'd only been living in Sunset Shores for 8 months, but from the beginning, this little waterfront neighborhood felt like home. The private marina was the main reason. I bought the place. Exclusive docking rights were written directly into my deed, but as I came around the final bend toward my dock, something immediately looked off. Very off. A glaring green metal sign was now bolted to the main post, and a yellow-black plastic chain stretched across the marina entrance like a weak attempt at a barrier. My first reaction was simple. What the hell is this? I'd only been gone 5 days, and somehow, during that short time, someone had laid claim to my property. The sign wasn't subtle. Huge white letters on that eye-watering green. HOA property, nitrogen monoxide docking. I had to reread it because it made zero sense. I was still trying to wrap my head around it when I heard someone clear their throat behind me. I turned and there she was. Mrs. Priscilla Prissy Higgins, HOA president, standing about 20 feet away pretending to fuss with the community. Rose bushes. I'd never seen her play tennis in my life, but she was decked out in pristine whites like she'd just won Wimbledon, watching me like she'd already triumphed. New HOA regulation, she announced, like she was explaining something to a particularly slow student. We're restructuring the waterfront for the benefit of all residents. Right, everyone's benefit. Prissy, I'm a logical person. I teach engineering. I like rules. I like order. But none of this made sense. What regulation? I asked, confused. There was nothing about this in the documents I received when I moved in. I pulled out my phone and started scanning the HOA app, where all neighborhood guidelines were supposed to be listed. Nothing. No mention of any docking restrictions. Prissy waved a hand like she was brushing away a gnat. You should read your property contract more carefully, she said, turning back to her gardening. And right there, I knew something was seriously off. I'm not one to make a public scene, especially not in front of neighbors likely watching from their windows, so, despite wanting to rip that sign down on the spot, I held back. This didn't feel like home anymore. My own dock suddenly felt alien. Instead, I grabbed my phone not to argue, but to document everything. The sign, the chain, the exact hardware they used to install it. I even got a picture with Prissy in the background, smug expression and all. I had a gut feeling this wasn't just a misunderstanding we could resolve with a call. Looking closer at the sign, something stood out. The font didn't match any of the other official HOA signs I'd seen since moving in. Neither did the logo. I'd noticed these things before because, well, details matter to me. This sign looked custom-made, professionally done, maybe, but not by the HOA. Someone had put real effort into making it look official, but it clearly wasn't. I zoomed in and took a close-up photo of the logo, then pulled up my original HOA welcome packet. Totally different logo, different wording, even the colors were off, and those mounting holes. They were fresh. Metal shavings still littered the base of the post. The bolts were new. This wasn't some old rule quietly enforced. This was brand new. Prissy had clearly installed it while I was away. The more I studied it, the more obvious it became. This wasn't random vandalism. It was a calculated move aimed directly at me. And whoever planned it clearly thought I'd be too nice to push back. The chain across the entrance, useless. It wasn't locked. It wasn't fastened in any meaningful way. You could step right over it. It was just for show, pure intimidation. The message was clear. You're not welcome here anymore. Except she didn't have that power. I tested the chain. It gave way instantly. Not even a deterrent. It wasn't meant to keep me out, it was meant to make me feel like I didn't belong, like I was trespassing, like I should back down. I glanced back at Prissy. She was still watching, clearly waiting for me to blow up or demand answers. Instead, I just nodded and walked back toward the house. Her face shifted, confused, like she didn't get the reaction she was hoping for. I think she wanted a confrontation, something dramatic she could use as fuel. As I walked away, she called out behind me, "I do hope you'll be reasonable about this, Reed. Fighting the community rarely ends well." Her voice had a sugar-sweet edge, but it felt more like a warning than advice. I didn't turn around, but I knew she was still watching. From my front door, I glanced back once. She hadn't moved, arms crossed, eyes locked on me, like a cat eyeing a trapped mouse. That's when it hit me, this wasn't going to be solved with a few polite phone calls. That night, I spread every property-related document I had across the dining room table. Everything from the closing day, every HOA letter, all the guidelines. I wasn't skimming, I was conducting a full forensic investigation. If there's one thing teaching teenagers has taught me, it's this: people lie when they think they won't be questioned. I organized the documents by date, checked signatures, compared stamps and seals. My engineering brain kicked into high gear. I even built a basic spreadsheet to track which documents mention what, looking for inconsistencies. If Prissy thought fake paperwork would scare me, she was about to find out how seriously I take documentation. As I closed the door that night, her voice echoed again, "Fighting the community never ends well." She thought I'd give up. She didn't know me at all. That night, I did what any rational teacher does when the system reeks of fiction. I traced every clause, every date, every phrase. This wasn't about reading. It was about fact-checking someone else's fantasy. Deed, HOA covenants, guidelines, welcome materials, even the survey fine print. Here's what I found. My Marina deed explicitly granted exclusive private docking rights, not conditional, not shared, exclusive, in perpetuity. The HOA covenant, it talked about general community standards but said nothing about regulating marina access or private dock usage. Zero. I wasn't done. I wanted to compare notes with other homeowners. Fortunately, our community website had a document portal where residents could see their own property paperwork. I started cross-referencing. Every single waterfront deed said the same thing: exclusive private docking rights. So either every homeowner had misread their deed or someone was making things up and hoping no one would notice. I was starting to believe it was the latter. The next morning, I found a letter in my mailbox. Looked legal, thick paper, letterhead, formal tone. It was a violation notice. $100 per day for allegedly violating Section 1B waterfront use regulations. I laughed out loud, because I'd just spent the entire night reading every HOA document. There was no Section 1B, it didn't exist. They were inventing rules out of thin air. I called the HOA office right away, and that's when things got weirder. After 4 rings, I got a generic voicemail about recent policy updates and a suggestion to check the community site. So I did. Still nothing new. No recent meeting minutes, no new regulations, no Section 1B anywhere. Shocking, right? I tried calling back 3 more times, at different times of day. Same message every time. At that point, I started to wonder if anyone even worked at the HOA office or if Prissy was running the whole thing from her kitchen. It felt less like a homeowners association and more like a backyard scam. So I went deeper. Residents had login credentials from the move-in process, and I used mine to dig into the internal files, meeting records, policy drafts, everything I could access. And hidden deep in a folder labeled Administrative Updates, I finally found it. Uploaded 3 days earlier, signed, dated and created by Prissy herself. No board approval, no timestamps from anyone else, just hers. This wasn't policy. I wasn't reading a guideline anymore. It was a roadmap to theft. She had literally made up these rules over the weekend while I was off sailing, typed them out herself, and slipped them into the system. No resident notification. No vote. No board review, nothing. I had to go over the document twice just to process what I was seeing. Not only had she fabricated entirely illegitimate regulations for the marina, but she'd also handed herself sweeping powers, the authority to fine residents, cut off utilities for not complying, and basically do whatever she wanted under the pretense of enforcement. I'm not a lawyer, but I'm pretty confident that's not how HOAs are supposed to operate. I documented everything: screenshots of the rules, the file metadata, the missing approval trail. What I was looking at wasn't just overreach, this was something a lot darker. Luckily, my background in engineering gave me an edge here. If she was going to fake authority, I was going to fight back with actual ingenuity. That night, I retreated to my garage workshop, nothing fancy, just basic tools I'd collected from the high school where I teach. I was determined to send the perfect message in response to Prissy's little stunt. And I knew exactly what would catch her attention. I sourced high-quality marine materials, reflective metals that wouldn't rust, weatherproof lettering that could withstand the elements, and mounting gear tough enough for coastal conditions. The sign I built was bold, unmistakable, and straight to the point. Not your hoe. 4 simple words, but they said it all. I made the sign large, clean, professional-looking, and absolutely permanent. During the day, the sun would reflect off its surface. At night, boat lights would make sure it stood out. I picked a font that looked sharp and businesslike but unmistakably defiant. This was more than a sign. It was a message. I was deliberate with every detail, ensuring the letters were evenly spaced and aligned. Compared to her rushed and flimsy signage, mine looked like something you'd see on a government installation. I wanted people to notice the difference between real, legitimate communication and her cobbled-together attempt at control. If she wanted a sign war, I was going to show her what real craftsmanship looked like. The reflective metal I used, same grade they use for traffic signs on highways. You could see this thing from the moon. Mounting it posed a bit of a challenge. I didn't want to damage my own dock post, and I definitely wasn't going to give her any excuse by tearing down her sign. So I created a custom mount that let me place my sign directly above her same post, side by side. The visual contrast was exactly what I wanted. Anyone walking by would see both messages, her fake HOA claim, and my very clear rebuttal. The next morning, I got up early and headed down to install it. The marine hardware fit perfectly, everything leveled out smoothly and held tight. 15 minutes later, I took a step back and admired the result. It looked fantastic, professional, permanent, and completely unmissable. Just as I was packing up, I heard the unmistakable pitter-patter of tiny dog claws clicking across the pavement. Here came Prissy, walking her absurd little chihuahua, Princess. Things were about to get interesting. "What is that?" she shrieked. Her voice was so sharp that Princess started yapping like she'd just seen a UFO. I turned around slowly and gave her my most neutral, innocent smile. "Just clarifying things," I said casually. "Truth in signage, you know, the expression." On her face was a masterpiece, total disbelief, mixed with fury and confusion. She clearly hadn't expected me to fight back, especially not like this. "I'm calling the police," she stammered, already reaching for her phone. "Please." "Doe," I replied calmly. "Would love to talk to them about property rights." And that's when I saw the slightest flicker of doubt in her eyes. She had been banking on me being too afraid to push back or too passive to challenge her authority. But now she realized I'd done my research, and I wasn't going anywhere. She took several photos of the sign from every angle, made a couple of tense phone calls, and glared at me from her kitchen window. Within the hour, the HOA maintenance truck passed my house twice. She was clearly escalating things, but the truth was, I had already set the terms. She just hadn't figured that out yet. When I got home from work on Tuesday, I found bright red tags slapped on the Marina's electrical box and water line, both sealed off. No warning. No explanation. Just done. No lights, no battery charge, no question about who was behind it. The seals had official-looking stamps with legal-sounding threats about utilities being suspended for failure to meet community harmony standards. No details, just vague nonsense. I stood there staring at the seals, thinking, can they actually do this? Apparently, they could. The boat battery couldn't charge. That meant dead navigation lights for the sailing trip I had planned. No fresh water to clean the boat or refill the tank. No dock lighting at night, which was a real safety risk for anyone walking along the waterfront. Even my bait cooler was losing its chill. $50 of fresh fishing bait about to go bad. This wasn't just harassment anymore. They were actively trying to force me out by making it impossible to use my own property. I watched the cooler's temperature rise and heard the compressor strain. I had maybe 6 hours before everything spoiled and possibly damaged the cooler itself. Even worse were the safety implications. Without lighting, Someone could easily trip and fall into the water during an evening stroll. Was Prissy really willing to endanger the neighborhood just to prove a point? That night, the water sounded unfamiliar, like it no longer belonged to Emmy. Neighbors passed without waving. The quiet wasn't calm, it was strategic. For the first time, I didn't feel angry or bold. Just worn out. People who had once been friendly now avoided eye contact or crossed the path to avoid me. I started asking myself if this was worth it. Was I really going to lose the one place I loved just to make a point? Maybe I should just take the sign down and find another Marina. Her plan was working: divide, isolate, pressure until the target breaks. As I sat there, listening to the water lap against the dock, I wondered if I had it in me to keep going. Was this courage or just stubborn pride? Then I noticed Jenna walking her golden retriever past my Marina for the third time that week. She lived a couple of streets over. Landscape architect. Always polite, but usually distant. This time, she didn't hurry by. She made eye contact. She slowed down. And then, she did something unexpected. She gave me a small, supportive smile. I stood up and walked toward her. "You look like you've got something to say," I offered gently. She glanced around, clearly nervous. I think what's happening to you is wrong," she said in a low voice. "Prissy's been getting more aggressive lately. A lot of us are uncomfortable." It was the first time anyone had actually acknowledged that something wasn't right. And honestly, it was exactly what I needed to hear. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't being dramatic. Then she told me something that changed everything. A few months back, Jenna had questioned some absurd contractor charges for the community garden. Suddenly, Prissy turned on her too. "She can't handle questions," Jenna explained. I asked why we spent 12 grand on landscaping that should have cost 3. Next thing I knew, I was kicked off the committee, disruptive to harmony and lacking vision for our shared future. Same exact language as my fake violation notice. It wasn't just familiar, it was predictive. If I didn't stop her, Jenna's story was my future. Prissy had spread rumors about Jenna, claimed she was difficult, not aligned with the community spirit. Classic tactics: undermine, isolate, discredit. And the worst part, it had worked. Jenna had been sidelined for months, shunned, treated with suspicion. All for asking simple, reasonable questions about money. We agreed to team up, but quietly. Jenna was scared to speak out because Prissy controlled every committee. "One wrong move and you were shut out." "She's been doing this a long time," Jenna warned. "But what she's doing to you, it's a whole new level." We planned to meet at a coffee shop outside the neighborhood. It sounded paranoid, but when someone's already cutting your power, you don't take chances. That night, I started looking into solar setups for the Marina. If they wanted to play power games, I'd just go off-grid. I found a small marine solar kit enough to keep the battery topped off and power some dock lights. Cost me $600 even with my teacher discount, but the peace of mind was worth it. I had it shipped to my school instead of home just to be safe. Just as I placed the order, my phone lit up. One message: "No name. Stop causing trouble or it gets worse." I'd built a dock. Now I was building a case. The next morning, Jenna texted with big news. Prissy had called an emergency HOA board meeting for that very evening, and she wanted Jenna to attend. As the community garden representative. Only problem: that position didn't even exist, and emergency meetings, they were supposed to come with 48 hours notice to all residents. Jenna had a strong enough hunch to bring her phone along and secretly record whatever Prissy was about to unveil in private. Smart move, because what she captured turned out to be far worse than either of us had anticipated. The gathering took place at Prissy's home, not the community center, which should have been the first warning sign. But Prissy clearly felt at ease with her remaining board members and had no problem speaking candidly about her true intentions. And she didn't hold back. Jenna didn't have to dig for anything this time. They laid it all out themselves, raw and unfiltered. The audio began with harmless chatter about upcoming community events. Less than 10 minutes in, Prissy launched straight into her full plan for dealing with so-called problem residents like me. Her exact words were, "Reed's Marina is a complete eyesore that brings in exactly the wrong kind of crowd." But it went far beyond that. Prissy wasn't just targeting my boat. Her goal was to systematically go after every private dock owner in the entire neighborhood. "We absolutely have to set a precedent here," she said on the recording. HOA controls all waterfront access, period. End of story. Her plan was simple. Once I was pushed out, she'd repurpose the private docks as fee-based community slips. That's right. She was essentially plotting to seize private property and turn it into a cash generator for the HOA. But it got worse. The recording made it crystal clear she'd been planning this scheme for months. She'd already identified 3 more dock owners as her next targets and had even investigated how much it would cost to challenge their deeds in court. My case, just the experiment. If she could push me out using bogus regulations and utility shutoffs, she'd repeat the same playbook across the community. This had nothing to do with community standards. It was all about greed and control. She literally referred to me as the test subject. Said once I was out of the way, the rest would fall like dominoes. But the part that really floored me. Turns out the HOA was facing a serious financial shortfall, thanks to Prissy's reckless spending on landscaping contracts. By converting the docks into community slips, they'd bring in over $50,000 in yearly fees, and Prissy had already arranged to take a hefty cut as a management fee. 50 grand in dock fees, her slice, quiet, clean, hidden, until now. The math she rattled off was shocking. $2,500 per slip. 20 docks annually. That's serious money, especially for someone who'd apparently been skimming from landscaping funds for years. I did the math in my head. If she pulled this off, she'd become a de facto Marina manager, pulling in 6 figures while the actual property owners were left with nothing. It was the perfect scam, assuming she could scare everyone into submission. She even talked about hiring a private security firm to enforce the new rules, effectively turning our once peaceful community into a mini police state, where her word was law. Jenna's recording also included detailed talk about cutting off utilities as a scare tactic against anyone who pushed back. Not just dock owners, anyone who questioned her authority would be harassed until they gave in or moved away. There were even conversations about jacking up HOA dues to fund lawsuits against uncooperative homeowners, forcing them to finance their own intimidation. Listening to it felt like eavesdropping on a mob boss planning a protection racket. When Jenna played the recording for me at a cafe just outside our neighborhood, I could barely process what I was hearing. This wasn't some petty power trip. It was a full-scale operation to steal property and silence dissent. She's been at this for years, Jenna said. Remember the garden project, same tactics. Anyone who speaks up gets pushed out. That's when I finally understood why Jenna was backing me. When she questioned those suspiciously inflated landscaping costs, Prissy had used the exact same methods to strip her of any influence. I got removed from the committee just for asking basic questions about contractor bids, Jenna told Emmy. No explanation, no appeals, just gone. Disruptive to community harmony, they said. Since then, she'd quietly kept records of Prissy's shady behavior as a form of protection in case she ever got targeted again. We spent a solid hours planning our counterattack. The next HOA meeting was just 6 days away, and we needed to present the evidence strategically to ensure maximum impact without tipping Prissy off ahead of time. Jenna agreed to bring backup documentation from her time on the committee, receipts, emails, minutes, everything that showed a pattern of financial misconduct and abuse of power. We were ready to bring everything into the light. The phony rules, the illegal utility shutoffs, the targeting of dock owners, and the underlying financial motive. We'd reveal it all, calmly, clearly, and in a way that couldn't be dismissed. But if Prissy found out beforehand, this wouldn't end with paperwork. That night, as I drove home, I finally felt like I had a fighting chance. But I also felt a gnawing sense of fear about what Prissy might do if she realized we had recorded proof of her plans. Someone willing to steal property and weaponize utilities wouldn't think twice about taking things even further if she felt threatened. As I rehearsed what I'd say, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was still keeping tabs on me, and next time, she wouldn't wait for a meeting. You've probably come across someone who misused their power. So tell me, would you stay silent to keep the peace, or risk everything to stand up for what's right? Drop a comment, because that's exactly the choice I had to make. And honestly, I still wasn't sure if I was doing the right thing. The room smelled like copy paper and unease. I hadn't seen this many neighbors gathered in one place since the fireworks mishap set the old gazebo ablaze. Word had clearly spread that something major was coming. The community center was packed with people who usually skipped these meetings entirely. I got there early to test the portable speaker I'd rigged up with a marine battery from my boat. No way was I relying on HOA electricity for this. Jenna took her seat with the other board members, her recording device tucked in her purse and ready. The tension in the air was almost suffocating. Prissy started things off with her usual speech about upholding community standards and maintaining property values through responsible leadership. She brought up ongoing waterfront compliance issues without naming names, but everyone knew who she meant. She looked every bit the professional, managing unruly residents with grace. I even saw a few people nodding along, unaware of what was coming. Then we reached the resident concerns portion of the meeting. I stood up and asked for the floor. Prissy's face tightened, clearly annoyed, but she couldn't deny me without looking bad in front of everyone. I'd like to share an audio clip related to some recent HOA decisions, I said, pulling out my speaker. The shift in Prissy's demeanor was immediate. Her confident mask slipped into something much more anxious. She knew something was wrong but couldn't quite place it. I hit play, and Prissy's voice echoed through the room. Reed's Marina is a total eyesore that attracts completely the wrong element to our community. Dead silence. You could hear a pin drop. Then came the next line. We absolutely need to establish precedent here. HOA controls all waterfront access. Period. End of discussion. Once we force him out completely, we can convert those private docks to fee-paying community slips. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A man whispered, "She really said that." Another added, "I got fined for having wind chimes." Prissy jumped up, scrambling for control. Her eyes darted, searching for a way out. Then she tried denial. "This is illegal surveillance," she shouted. "You can't play that. I demand you stop." But it was too late. The recording rolled on, detailing her plans to use utility shutoffs as leverage and to go after every dock owner in town. The crowd looked around in stunned silence as the truth sank in. Their HOA president had been plotting behind their backs. The best part, watching her face go from pink to crimson as her own words exposed everything. You could see the exact moment she realized her private schemes were now out in the open. The audio was crystal clear, undeniably hers. Any excuse about doctored recordings fell flat instantly. For a second, I almost felt bad for her. Then I remembered the fake violations, the shutoffs, the bullying, and my sympathy vanished. The room erupted. People began shouting over each other, bringing up fence fines, bird feeder bans, made-up aesthetic policies. Mr. Williams, who lived a few houses down and owned a dock, stood up. "So that's why I got cited for improper mooring. You were setting me up," Mrs. Carter added. "She pulled the same stunt with my fence last year, made up violations that don't exist anywhere in the handbook." One by one, neighbors began sharing their stories. Garden gnome crackdowns, work van citations, elderly couples harassed over bird feeders. All of it followed the same pattern: imaginary rules, arbitrary punishments, and fear-based enforcement. The whole room buzzed as people put the pieces together and realized they'd all been victims of the same playbook. Then Jenna stood, holding printed records like she was wielding a blade. She presented everything: unauthorized rules, fake minutes, redacted budget reports. When she dropped the final page, someone clapped, then another. Then the room joined in. She showed emails where Prissy silenced board members who questioned spending, proof that meeting minutes had been edited, and financial gaps Prissy had hidden for over a year. "She uses fear to shut down anyone who questions her," Jenna said firmly. The collapse was instant. Residents called for Prissy's immediate resignation. Even her own supporters turned on her, finally brave enough to voice their concerns. The people she'd manipulated for years saw the truth and backed away. Even her little chihuahua, Princess, whimpered nervously from her carrier in the corner. As a last resort, Prissy tried to threaten me with legal action for recording the meeting. I calmly explained that Jenna's recording came from an official HOA board session, public under state law. Every bit of what we presented was legal documentation of misconduct. No more hiding, no more fear. The truth was finally out. The legal threats landed with a thud so weak, in fact, that several neighbors couldn't help but chuckle at how blatantly desperate she was. One voice from the crowd even shouted, "Maybe you should have considered the legal fallout before you started taking things that weren't yours." Ever watched someone's web of lies unravel in front of a crowd? It's both mesmerizing and a bit unnerving. In just 15 minutes, Prissy shifted from smug authority to a cornered animal, and her frantic efforts to regain control only made her look worse. A snap decision led to an emergency vote to replace the entire HOA leadership. Jenna was unanimously selected as interim president. Everyone agreed, except for Prissy. As the vote was being sealed, Prissy snatched up Princess and stormed toward the door. But not before tossing out one last warning. "This isn't over," she growled, locking eyes with me. "You have no idea what you've started." She slammed the door so hard the windows trembled. But it wasn't the sound that stayed with me, it was the chilling hiss she left behind. "You think this ends here?" The room broke into applause, not just for me, but for the sheer relief of being free from a tyrannical HOA president. Still, her parting words echoed in my mind. Was it just bluster or a warning of more chaos to come? What happened next was almost instant. Jenna was confirmed interim president by unanimous vote from the remaining board members. Her first official act: turn my utilities back on and strip away every unauthorized sign from the Marina. Within hours, my power and water were fully restored, and that phony HOA sign was finally gone. Crews came out that same evening to ensure everything was running smoothly. Just like that, everything snapped back into place. Basic services and property rights I never should have had to fight for in the first place. But Prissy didn't exit quietly. She hired a high-powered attorney to challenge the legality of the recorded meeting and demand full reinstatement as president. From what I could tell, the lawyer expected an easy case at first. But once he reviewed the actual evidence, the story collapsed. Jenna's recording was legally sound. It took place during an official HOA board session, and every bit of our documentation clearly showed years of wrongdoing. As soon as he realized how badly Prissy had misled him, he dropped her case entirely. The new board promptly ordered an independent forensic audit of HOA finances during Prissy's tenure, and what surfaced was worse than any of us had imagined. Tens of thousands funneled to a shell company owned by her nephew. Landscaping work that was never done. Receipts for literal nothing. The audit revealed compelling evidence of possible embezzlement through massively inflated contracts. The district attorney opened a criminal investigation based on the findings, though they seemed more interested in financial restitution than jail time. Invoices for premium mulch that cost $8,000 when the same job should have been $800. A $15,000 bill for proprietary irrigation tools that, conveniently, nobody could locate. It was a masterclass in creative theft, except she'd left behind a breadcrumb trail even a freshman accounting student could follow. The verdict, clear-cut. My rights were valid. Her signs and utility shutoffs were unlawful from the start. Everything I did was fully within my rights as a property owner, and her actions were never legal to begin with. One legal advisor even told me I had grounds for a major lawsuit, but honestly, I just wanted peace. The healing in our neighborhood was incredible to witness. We held a full town hall to reset HOA policies and rebuild trust. After years under Prissy's iron-fisted rule, people finally opened up stories of intimidation, made-up infractions, retaliation against anyone who questioned her. The consensus was immediate. We needed transparent governance, legal compliance, and resident oversight. We rebuilt the HOA from the ground up. Public votes, financial audit trails, a real appeals process, new rules that protected instead of punished. Independent financial audits became an annual requirement, with full results shared with every resident. Violations could now be appealed to a neutral 3-person panel with the authority to make final decisions. The community asked me to serve as ombudsman for future disputes, and I proudly accepted. My background in engineering and the integrity I'd shown made me a trusted choice for conflict resolution. I set up a dedicated hotline for any residents concerned about HOA overreach. We even established a formal way to investigate misconduct by board members. Never again would one person have unchecked power over everyone else. Prissy's exit was as dramatic as her reign. She abruptly resigned and announced she was moving out of state, citing an unexpected job offer. But we all knew the truth: she was running from looming civil consequences. She sold her home far below market value, clearly eager to disappear. Before things got worse legally, no criminal charges were filed, but she faced hefty civil penalties, especially for cutting off utilities without authorization, and had to pay back the HOA for misused funds. The best part: watching our neighborhood come together like never before. My marina, once a battleground, became a symbol of rights and community spirit. Neighbors who once feared speaking out finally felt safe to take part. Home values even went up thanks to the HOA's new reputation for fairness and transparency. But peace doesn't mean permanence. And I wasn't quite ready to drop anchor for good. 5 years later, I'm back on that same dock. Not as a fighter but just a neighbor, surrounded by calm waters and no clipboards in sight. This place has become exactly what I hoped for when I first moved in. My old "Not Your HOA" sign now hangs in the garage, a keepsake, a teaching tool. The new sign reads, "Marina, private dock, neighbors always welcome," because I've learned that real strength comes from inclusion, not resistance. The marina has grown into so much more than my personal boat slip. We host safety workshops. Local kids call the dock lights Mr. Reed's Lighthouse. That's enough for me. Jenna and I now collaborate on waterfront beautification projects that respect private property while improving our shared spaces. What started as rebellion became a lighthouse, literally and figuratively, for stability and hope. The story caught national attention. I received hundreds of heartfelt messages from folks fighting their own HOA nightmares. I even helped form a grassroots network of homeowners exchanging legal tips and moral support. I've spoken at reform conferences, sharing our Sunset Shores model, and now replicated example of what transparency and fairness can achieve. People from Alaska to Florida reached out with their stories. One woman in Texas fined for having unapproved flowers. A man in Arizona punished for parking his work truck in his own driveway. An elderly couple in Ohio harassed daily because their mailbox was the wrong shade of black. The pattern was always the same: small-minded people abusing tiny bits of power, but change spreads fast. Jenna was later elected permanent president with a 95% approval rating. Our HOA model has been featured in national publications as a case study in responsible governance. For me personally, the impact was life-changing. I wove the experience into my engineering curriculum, teaching students about due process, property rights, and peaceful resistance alongside technical subjects. Years later, some returned to tell me those lessons sparked their civic engagement. Our story became part of the local high school civics class, and knowing that I helped inspire a generation to stand up for fairness made every headache worth it. As for Percy, she ended up in a retirement community in Florida, one with very strict HOA rules. From what I hear, she's thriving in a system where rules are rigid and expected. She even mailed me a short apology 2 years later. I accepted it. Some people really do need structure, they just shouldn't be the ones creating it from scratch. We were never meant to lead the same kind of community. These days, I sail the Wanderer every weekend, often joined by new neighbors. Those dockside get-togethers have become spontaneous celebrations of unity. The demand for my sailing lessons is so high there's a waiting list. What used to be a personal escape is now a shared space that unites us without crossing property lines. 3 years after the original conflict, I helped a new neighbor facing deja vu, a rogue board member trying the same intimidation game. Using the same documentation and organizing strategies we had refined, we resolved the issue in a single meeting. The homeowner, a young nurse, had just bought a hybrid car to save on gas for her commute. The board member claimed it clashed with the neighborhood's traditional aesthetic: same script, bogus rules, threats of fines. But this time, the system worked. Our documentation exposed the false citations instantly. The appeals board overturned the nonsense within 48 hours. That board member removed within a week. It was like watching a finely tuned immune system neutralize a virus before it could spread. But even after the dust settled, the bigger lesson remained. The strongest communities are the ones that defend everyone's rights, not just those who shout the loudest. True leadership connects people, it doesn't divide them. And when push comes to shove, it's worth fighting for what's right. But the goal should always be lasting peace, not endless battles. Standing up to bullies takes more than courage, it takes wisdom and restraint too. Looking back, what I really learned was how fragile peace can be and how worth it is to protect. My marina could have become a symbol of stubbornness. Instead, it became a place of gathering and mutual respect. The fight was never just about a dock. It was about fairness, about protecting what makes a neighborhood livable. 5 years later, I still watch the sunset over Sunset Shores, sitting on my dock with the Wanderer gently swaying beside friendly boats. Jenna often drops by with her little girl, and we chat about future community plans. As night falls, my solar lights flicker to life, casting a soft glow over the water. I smile, knowing I didn't just find justice, I found a true home. One where everyone belongs. Sunset Shores has flourished in ways I never dreamed possible back when things were bleak. Our property values rose not from fear or control, but from word of mouth about fairness and cooperation. New families come here for that very reason, to be part of a community built on rights and respect. The dock once stood as a line in the sand. Now, it stands for what's possible when people work together with good intentions. Battles like this don't really end, but if you stand your ground, sometimes you create something stronger. That's what stuck with me most, not the win, not the headlines, not even the sign, but the quiet that followed, not forced, not fearful. Just earned. It's easy to forget how delicate peace is until someone tries to take it. Maybe the real takeaway is this: you don't protect a community by staying silent. You protect it by speaking up when it matters most. If you made it this far, I'd love to hear your story. Ever had to stand your ground for something that truly mattered? And hey, if you enjoyed this one and want to help the channel, there's always the little thanks button below. Appreciate you sticking around.